Thank you everyone for joining us this evening for the information session on the Graduate Certificate in Public Art. We'll get started, nothing like being prompt. And as other people come in, they can join us for the session. So we'll start off with an information session, and then towards the end of about 20-25 minutes, we will move into a Q&A where you'll be able to have your questions answered. Down the bottom of the toolbar is a little Q&A function. So please keep typing your questions in there. We'll accumulate them, and then at the end, we will answer the questions for you. So today's session, the Graduate Certificate in Public Art, is being presented by our Professor of Fine Art and renowned Australian artist, Callum Morton. And he is also the director of MAP, which is the Monash Art Project. So I will hand it over to Professor Morton. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. I'd like to begin, of course, by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, waters and networks, of course, on which Monash University operates. And I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging of the Kulin Nations. At Monash Design, Art Design and Architecture, or MADA, as we are commonly called, we acknowledge Aboriginal connection to material and creative practice on these lands for more than 60,000 years and celebrate their enduring presence and knowledge. And we would like to welcome any First Nations friends here with us tonight. I am in a little corner study in our house right near the front door, and there might be a little bit of traffic. So if you hear my daughter say something, she goes, "I can't mute because I'm giving a lecture." So I'm speaking to you. So hopefully there won't be any interruptions. But first of all, let me begin by thanking you for your interest in this exciting new course at MADA that's been in development for a number of years. I'm going to give you a fair amount of the context in which you will be studying, and then talk more specifically about the course at the end. And then, as Scott said, we'll open it up to questions in the Q&A session. So, of course, at MADA, we teach art, architecture and design. In fine art, as well as undergraduate program and graduate programs in fine art practice. We also have a significant curatorial program from the Bachelor of Art History and Curating, and the only practice-based curatorial PhD in the country. We are ranked the number one art school in the country for research, simply based on the quality of people we have who teach here. And I'll talk more about that later. And we're the only school to be graded a 5 consistently over a number of eras. Of course, we're a university in the top 1% of universities in the world. So you're guaranteed a very good education. We're top 10 in Australia and top 50 worldwide in art and design specifically. And we're ranked number 6 in Australia for architecture, which is remarkable for such a course that's started in the last 10 years. Now, look, many of you probably would know MADA. I noticed there's a couple of people from overseas on there, so you don't. So this contextual stuff for those who don't know is for you. We're a creative community at MADA. We've been an art and design school on the Caulfield campus for almost 100 years. In fact, 2022 is our centenary celebration, and we have a long and rich history of engagement with creative practice. We're distinguished by our capacity to collaborate across different disciplines, both within our faculty and across the university. We are an internationally networked university with a range of international partners and campuses on 4 continents. And I think we are producing some of the most significant artists and designers working in the world today. The Caulfield campus and MADA more broadly have undergone significant development over the last 10 years. We've renovated the library. There are new galleries, workshops, breakout spaces, cafes, common areas, landscape areas, and so on. We have, as part of that at MADA, we installed a new range of workshops. We opened up the faculty to these workshops in the main building, the Building G. We have these high-tech workshops. We have 3D printers, CNC machines, both big and small, laser cutters, water jet printers, scanning facilities, and so on, all the way down to the back of the campus where fine art is, with our so-called dirty workshops, the sculpture workshops, the welding, casting happens down there. We have painting and drawing spaces, we have photography studios. Yes, we still have dark rooms, professional photography equipment, printmaking studio, fantastic printmaking studio. We have one of the only universities in Australia with a hot glass workshop, and jewelry studios as well. We have large format printing, multiple printers across the faculty, and I mentioned the 3D printers and so on, and as well as film editing equipment. At the heart of the campus, and we call this a sort of the cultural or creative campus of Monash University, is Monash University Museum of Art, which really is a kind of jewel in the crown. At the heart of the campus, it's been collecting Australian contemporary art since the 1960s, has over 3,000 objects in its collection, which is distributed across the university, has incredible programs of exhibitions with Australian and international artists, and it has a remarkable public art collection, public art program that I'll talk to a bit later, and we work closely with them in that, where this course is going to be taught out of. I talked about the galleries, the new Marta Gallery, which is used largely for graduate shows, but is open to most students, and has curated shows in there as well. Intermission Gallery, which is the student-run gallery, and there are other kind of breakout spaces across the faculty as well. And we've produced in fine art, and I'm not talking about design and architecture, but in fine art, we've produced some remarkable alumni. This is an example of a few. Dr. Alex Martinez-Rowe has just been appointed head of drawing, Victorian College of the Arts. She has this very expanded practice which looks at feminism. Joseph Griffith, who did his master's with us a number of years ago, makes work with water, did all these public interventions, making these outdoor temporary fountains. And Paul Yor, many might know, who's established an incredible career in the last 10 years. So what is public art? So many of you, of course, are interested in it and have some sense of what it is. It's a burgeoning field of practice that's proliferating across the world in a variety of forms, whether those are more traditional forms of sculpture or minor architecture like pavilions, light works, ephemeral works, digital screen-based works, environmental works, or interactive works, just to name a few. We believe it's an interdisciplinary field of practice that sits somewhere between art, architecture, and design more broadly, and which is why we're uniquely placed to deliver it. It's traditionally artist-led, think memorials and statuary and so forth, but it's increasingly a field that is led by teams of people collaborating together to conceive of and realise projects that are either temporary or permanent. So its production relies on large teams of people, and in truth, it is more like building an infrastructure than art production in the traditional sense. We believe that public art is a field of practice that is chronically misunderstood, and whether public or private, it's often poorly delivered, a fact that can have a significant effect on a sense of place. But when it's good, it has the capacity to trigger critical and poetic responses that can elevate the context in which it appears. We think it's a vital form of cultural production. Why study public art at Monash? Well, we think we're uniquely placed to deliver a course like this for a number of reasons. We have a thriving research culture that responds to the complexity of contemporary society and its societal and environmental challenges, from climate change and urbanisation to technological change, social cohesion and equity, means that it had to have the interview of an interdisciplinary and creative approaches that are increasing demand. We have three key areas of research that's just manifested largely through our lab culture, of which Monash Art Projects is one. and they are health and human experience, expansive visions and technologies, and reimagining cities. And indeed, public art intersects quite significantly with all those areas of research. And I can talk maybe in the Q&A a bit more about the type of research we have in our lab culture, but it is really driving the way we both research and teach. Another reason is that we are expert in the delivery of an iterative collaborative studio methodology that's very important in the successful conception and delivery of public art. So this studio-based learning. This studio mode is a hybrid one, we think, and the one that we've developed and the one that we teach, that sits across the methodology of, say, a fine art studio crit, and with its potential of disruption and so on, and the more applied iterative process of a design and architecture studio process. So in a sense, this public art course is going to sit, wedged, centrally between all the disciplines. It's just another example of, just move through this. We have a cohort of staff of some of the most significant artists in the country who are also expert practitioners in the field of practice of public art. So they're terrific artists and they show in many contexts, and public art is one of those contexts in which they show. And many artists and designers that are on this webinar will understand that our careers proliferate across a range of different areas. It's not, you just don't just no longer work in just one context. You work in multiple contexts, often simultaneously. And these artists here that will teach into the course as well are terrific in that sense. So Emily Floyd, with her work Public Art Strategy, she has done many works, probably the most prolific practitioner of public art on faculty at MARTA. Myself, there's other projects I'll show. I did the hotel on the Eastlink Freeway. Kathy Tenman, who's the head of fine art, with a couple of her works in MAP, we have a really large-scale project we're working on with her at the moment. This is one of her first public art works called Garden Islands. And there's temporary work, because temporary public art is an important part of what we do as well. This koala tram. Brooke Andrew, who's associate professor with us. Maybe many of you know that he was the most recent curator of the Sydney Biennale in Nirran, which was unfortunately affected, like everyone else, by COVID-19, but was an incredibly significant moment in I think, Australian cultural life. He is also a prolific practitioner of public art, and we've worked with him in MAP a number of times. Daniel von Sturmer, who's Associate Dean of Education in the faculty, also a lecturer in fine art. This was a project we did with him in MAP that was completed last year on the new Geelong Performing Arts Centre called Painted Light, which was videos, and I can show you a bit that in more detail, videos of paint dripping and going through a range of sequences. And I talked about Mama's program of public art, and I'll just show you a bit of the public art that occupies, that is scattered, I should say, across the campuses of Caulfield and Monash. This amazing work by Agatha Goff-Snape in 2015 as part of the new development of the landscape into the entrance of the campus. It's called The Scheme. This scheme was a blueprint for future development programs. It's kind of emotional map. Ronnie Van Hout, who did a temporary work outside Monash called RUR, that he also did a permanent work based on this work that's up in the, I can show you later, up in the Clayton campus. Emily Floyd, who I mentioned before, she has this permanent work at Monash. It's actually on the Caulfield campus. This place will always be open, which refers to the history of the university as a kind of radical campus in the 60s and in the 60s and 70s. James Angus has built an Unbuildable from 2015. Rose Nolan's tiled Give or Take text piece in the new revamped library at Caulfield. Esther Stewart, one of a number of artists who painted the lift cores as a kind of type of graphic signage up at Clayton. Dan Moynihan's Mirrored Brick revamp of an old science building. And it goes right back at Monash. You know, Inga King did a work here in the 60s, and Leonard French's famous stained glass work up at Caulfield, Alpha and Omega. Monash also, you know, they do programs of public art and exhibitions and so forth, but they also deliver symposia, and we work with them on a very successful public art conference. When I say we, I mean Monash Art Projects. We collaborated with them. We often collaborate with them on the delivery of their public art programs. In fact, and this conference, Let's Go Outside, Making Art Public, had some amazing speakers like Jonathan Jones, Nicholas Bohm, and others. Okay, just to talk about Monash Art Projects a little bit, because the course is going to be taught out of Monash Art Projects. It's going to frame it. I mean, you've all probably seen the structure of the course around a sort of central, and I'll talk a bit more about the central studio unit, an art history and theory unit, and then a communications and technology unit. The studio unit will be, and the pinups will happen inside Monash Art Projects. So it was established in 2013, and I would say it's the most significant public art research centre in the country. And we deliver multiple permanent art we're currently delivering multiple permanent art projects across the country and overseas. And as I mentioned before, like MUMA, we deliver permanent and temporary public art projects and publications and symposia. We have over 100 projects on our books, so we've been very active in the space. The volume of work has been remarkable. And just a few examples of projects, and I'll talk to sort of one in a bit more detail around just to illustrate the way the studio might operate. Monument Park back in 2014, and the name listed at the front, the collaborators who worked on it from MAP. This was a collaboration with Oculus Landscape and MCR Architects of a, it was artist-led, but of a series of works in Melbourne's Docklands, based on the collection of covered series of works based on the collection in the city of Melbourne. So famous public statues that were kind of covered, then broken open to create other spaces. Innovation Walk, which was actually part of MUMA's public art program, was an integrated project, and we do this a lot with MAP. We work alongside architects and landscape architects and designers. Sometimes we've worked on very big, worked with very big teams of people that have included Indigenous leaders, intellectuals, biologists, other scientists, and so on. So this is this kind of collaborative model. This was with Kosloff Architecture and Rushright Architects, and it was the reinvention of an old 60s building, science building at Monash University, with this adaptive reuse of applying a new skin to the building. And we worked with them on the development of the entire facade, and specifically we worked on, we delivered the entrance, and the facade is as if it's going to have been lifted up, and this old skin is behind at the ground, on the ground level. Brooke Andrew, I talked about this work we did in MAP, standing by Tunnerminnerwait and Morboina, the two last Indigenous warriors to be executed in Melbourne for crimes. This is on the site where that took place. So it's a memorial sited near the old Melbourne Jail and the city bars. close to where 5,000 people watched them hang for the murders. So, I mean, Matt talks about doing work that is critical and poetic, often tackling difficult subjects. We're positioned inside a research institution for a reason, because we apply that research in multiple ways in the production of work. Project that we have at the moment, which is these reinvention of old doorways in Sydney laneways with the City of Sydney, looking at various patterning and political and social histories across the city and combining them inside sort of tile patterns. This South Bank Major Commission, which is one we didn't win, but I'm showing it because it's an example of a big team and of a kind of ambitious project that remains kind of speculative, but still a work. As many of you would know, if you have dipped your toe into the water of public art, and I know some of you on there have, there are just as many that disappear that make it into the world. And there are lots of disappointments along the way, because it's a competitive tender process, which is why I don't think it's like typical art practice. Obviously, public art belongs closer to the process of architecture, tendering. And you would know that if you've worked in this space. And so if there are architects and designers in the webinar, you will, the course is being kind of taught for you as potential practitioners as well as artists. And we're saying that there are large teams that work on these things, and you're more familiar with the kind of process than artists are. For artists who haven't had the experience of public art, well, this is one of the reasons we're teaching the course, because it's very specific, the type of skills you need to not only be successful, but to enter into the fray of public art. And I think you need a range of skills, and both conceptual and technical, to be able to do that successfully. Anyway, the South Bank Major Commission, I collaborated closely with the terrific Indigenous artist Ioane Scarce and the team in Matt, and we proposed this building outside the VCA in South Bank. And the proposal was to build a descale version of an institutional colonial building, the old Treasury. In fact, it's up on Spring Street, and then precisely cut it open. It was looking at institutional racism. In fact, precisely cut it open and then colonize it, if you like, or recolonize it with an Indigenous garden. We worked with Charlie Solomon, an Indigenous landscaper, on the project, and Ioane covered the interior, this is it at night, with her famous black yams. This was actually before the project that some of you might have seen. It was at the NGV, where she had her black yams going up the wall on the inside, but this was actually before it. Okay, just to look at the course structure. Some of you might have got the flyer, so you'll understand it's divided, as many art schools are, in fact, between a studio, a research and practice studio, an art history and theory unit, and a communications and technology unit. I'm sure some of you will have many questions about a number of those. So the studio subject is the backbone of the degree, where students work with real projects. So what we will do is we will either get a brief, like this City Centres Laneways one, which was the one for the doorways, and get a brief that's existing in the world and get you to respond to that, either collectively or as individuals, using the same sort of timelines that apply to the brief. Of course, it will sort of match the length of the duration of the semester. And where possible, what we'll try and do, that if there is a public art commission that is live during the semester time, it's not always going to be easy to line up the ducks. We will get you to enter that commission, to propose something. So there's lots of options there. And there's usually with the process of public art, there's an EOI expression, which is at stage 1, expression of interest. And so, and then there'll be a kind of accompanying brief, which, this City of Sydney one was particularly good because it was very evocative. They'd done a lot of work on delivering a complex reading of the context in which it was operating, and very kind of evocative and stimulating way to maybe think about what the ambitions they had for the space. So, that's one part of the course also, to go through what makes a good brief, what doesn't make a good brief, what sort of policy decisions go towards making public art work and not, and so on. We will talk about all those things through the duration of the course. I just wanted to show you just something, the way we do an application in MAP, which will be sort of direct how we teach it as well. So we did a proposal for Nick Mangan. Nicholas Mangan is a terrific artist, one of the artists that has worked with us in MAP. And this was for a large sculpture on Geelong Road. So the EOI, hang on, it was, you had the invitation. So they wanted the submission. You have to have the idea, the methodology, so how you're going to make it, and who with, the cost plan, the program, how long it will take. And then if you win, there will be an agreement, aka a contract, which is why we have architects in that, because it really helps to negotiate contracts with architects, because they're expert in the delivery of that. And then you go through the project stages of concept design, often for the stage 2 part, design development, sometimes with a building. This may involve a planning permit, then the fabrication, which may involve a subcontractor with a maker, builder, fabricator, or multiple fabricators, and then the installation. So it describes a very complex process that that isn't just like sort of making a sculpture in a studio and sticking it outdoors anymore. So these are examples of of Nick's EOI, where we put together what the budget looks like, the project team that will kind of resource it, and then we produce some kind of sketchy images at EOI stage that indicate where the work, what Nick's thinking, material sort of studies, context studies, construction methodologies, and Nick worked very closely with the fabrication labs to produce really, I'll show you an example of really terrific 3D models of these works. And he did get shortlisted for this. He didn't win the project, unfortunately, but he did get down to the final 5. So, and then you generally get paid a significant fee, maybe $5,000 to $10,000 to deliver to the next stage. The Geelong Performing Arts Centre, I showed you a little bit of Daniel's painted light with the light dripping down the facade. These are kind of some examples of it at night, going through its kind of cycles. And then, just some example of the other stuff that we kind of produced, and the stuff that we're trying to teach you to be able to produce, which are, elevations, studies, renders, some studies directly taken from Daniel's, studio work, some sequencing ideas, kind of ideas about the type of light that would be installed that could deliver this work, and so on. And these concept images obviously are sort of something that every submission requires. And in MAP, we do a very good job at developing these proposals so that the person on the other side making the decisions has a very clear idea of what it is. With Sydney Laneways, I've run a bit out of time, so I'm not going to, this was just some of the iterative process and research methodology around the development of all these doorways in Sydney that led to the final 3. It was going to be 6 originally. And, it's a very complex process, choosing which doors. You could imagine getting permissions from owners, that changing over time. This project's been going on for 4 years. I think the sort of average for a public art project, from its initial conception through to its delivery is around, 3 to 4 years. So choosing tiles, and so forth. So the studio will be, you'll be in MAP, and each week you'll be asked to, there'll be different components, but you'll be asked to iterate the idea, and you'll pin up, and there'll be a class discussion. You can work together, or you can work on your own. We would encourage you to work together. It just depends on the number of people that are in the course to enable that. But it's not that different to something like an architecture studio, actually. The pin-up and then the kind of discussion, but it is something a bit more aligned to the fine art crit in how that discussion takes place and how the generation of ideas are performed. So art history and theory, Luke Smythe, who's a terrific art historian. We have a fantastic art history and theory program. Luke Smythe will be delivering that. There'll be 4 key lectures, and then there'll be a number of invited guests, including many public art practitioners, artists and architects and designers coming in to talk about their work. There'll be some professional practice stuff actually sitting inside the studio, so some of those lectures as well. So Professor Luke Morgan, who's famously, his research area is landscape design, which is actually very relevant inside the space of public art. So Luke is one of the people that will contribute to this. And Rex Butler, of course, he's famously, a famous Australian art historian, and was the founder of Memory Review. One of the contributing writers. Memory Review happens in the office next door to MAP. Communication and technology unit. Well, that won't be. We'll have to kind of measure where you're at with your capacity to deliver images, your capacity to use particular programs to develop proposals and design proposals and so on. But generally it would be a course that helps you develop the communication technology skills in digital publishing and 3D digital imaging. So we will help you kind of model your ideas. You can go down and print your ideas, print your models, and you'll be introduced to building and manipulating digital models using CAD and so on. If people are already well versed in CAD, there'll be more advanced things we can do. But we'll just have to design that unit depending on your capacity. There's also the option potentially to take other units. If you're already well versed in this space, you might want to take an elective from somewhere else. So we can talk a bit further about that. These are some of those models that I talked about that Nick Mangan produced. So that's it from me. So sorry, I went a bit over time by about 4 minutes, but looking forward to hearing some of your questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Callum. That was great. That information was fantastic, just to see those actual projects that you've all been working on. It's brilliant. Just the large scale projects. So we are open for questions now. If anyone has any questions, please type them into the Q&A and then we will answer them for you. So anything about the graduate certificate in public art, any of the projects that you've seen there through Callum's presentation that you may like some more information on. Applications for the program are open now and it's direct to Monash. So you simply apply online from the link to the actual study at Monash or graduate certificate in public art page, excuse me. And what they're looking for, as you all probably are aware, is that undergraduate degree, work and experience or relevance in and around a related or allied field. And with the application, there is also a statement of intent. So it's a small 300 to 500 words. And there's also a little bit of asking for some evidence of any sort of creative works or works that you have contributed to or worked on aligned with.
Which will be very important. Yeah, go on.
We've got one question that's actually come in and we might go back to that in a second about the extra requirements. So we have a question that's come in from Anonymous, who has asked, can subjects to complete this course be taken as electives as part of the Masters of Architecture course? Potentially, I might ask Callum, but potentially if they're available in the suite of electives.
Hang on, so the question is, can electives in architecture as part of the Master of Architecture be taken as part of it? Well, yes. I mean, architecture have a structure of what they call selectives, actually. The original thinking was that, yes, because it would be hard to measure the communication and technology skills that many people have, that we would open up that suite to other subjects. And so we will have to kind of look into what can be taken, what can't be taken. I mean, certainly if you're taking electives in the Masters of Architecture, there will be prerequisites for some of them. So you might not be able to walk in cold, but certainly, you know, so some of the comms subjects, comms 1 and 2 that sit in architecture, that could be taken. I don't see any issue with that. I mean, I designed a course, 3D modeling for artists, that was, you know, largely for fine artists, and many architects and designers take that. So it's quite fluid across the faculty where you can enroll in. So yeah, I would like the unit to be fluid depending on I mean, I think like contemporary education and something like this, it would be about measuring what the cohort needed. You know, I think the studio and the art history and theory unit are givens. I think there's certain things, you know, we really want to teach, you know, in art history and theory, and of course there's a very specific project, but yeah, that unit is more fluid.
Thank you so much for that answer, Callum. Also, I would suggest, just if you're a current student, also just contact student services as well. So marta@monash.edu, and they'll be able to assist you as a current student. A few more questions have come in. So we've got a big one here from Abby. So thank you. The course does sound amazing, doesn't it, Abby? I want to kind of do it myself. So let's have a look as I go through the career opportunity.
So is it on the Q&A, Scott?
Yeah. So this one is in the Q&A. So hasn't finished the undergraduate degree, but has been working as a mural artist for 6 years with industry experience. Has some idea in the area. I tender a lot of my work now.
Yeah, I can read it, yeah.
Oh, cool. Sorry.
That's okay. No, sorry. No, so, and now I really love to add this course to my experience to grow others. Oh, certainly would, you know, we would consider your experience. So it would not be a barrier at all. So what we want to see is what experience you have. I mean, we're assuming you're going to have finished your undergraduate degree. Oh, you didn't finish your undergraduate degree.
No. So my suggestion would be still apply. Generally, there is a rule that you need to have an undergraduate degree for Monash, but because it depends on what level you finished, what GPA, but you've also got that work experience. So it would be advisable to apply, but also include a CV and just document the work experience related to public art. Sorry, Callum.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I would like it to be, I mean, the grad cert might be a bit more open. You have to speak to other people that are a bit more knowledgeable on that, because, you know, we're only sort of dipping our toe into the grad cert thing more recently, aren't we? So, but, you know, generally I want to share our kind of restrictions on that, but you know, we'll certainly look into it for you.
Cool. So yes, apply, definitely, and just document
yes.
The information there.
Yeah, just apply, document, send your information through. I mean, of course, we see potential tenders for public murals all the time, you know, I mean, almost daily. You know, I mean, that doorway project is kind of an example of that, to be honest, but not the sort of painted murals, but, you know, that's certainly something we're thinking about and are familiar with. So, so yeah, we'd love to see what you're doing.
Thank you very much for the question, Abby. The next one is, could be a tricky one. We've got a question from Tope, who has asked, is there potential to take the course part-time or a lighter load over a year?
Now, this is someone I know, I think that worked with us in MAP
Thank you
actually
for
many
joining
years
us.
ago, Andres time, and love to have you part of it. Yeah, I think so. I think we could take it. You could do it part time, but no problem. You could do the studio one component, and we could stretch it out. So yeah, there's absolutely no problem with the core structure and adapting to that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Lucky you came and got the answers.
Yeah.
Brilliant. There are quite a few more coming in.
Okay, I'm just looking at Amanda's. Extensive experience designing and project managing public art projects. Whatever I do have an, or same applies, advanced diploma and welding, forging. Well, that sounds like a great set of skills. So yes, it's the same answer, Amanda. We would, apply and we will look into it. Right, Scott?
Absolutely. Yep. My suggestion is, from past experience, it's better to put the application in, spend a bit of time doing it. We're asking for the applications to be in around mid-November. That way it gives you a chance for us to assess the application and get back to you. So it gives you a sense of certainty of what you can get up to next year. Yep, put it in. Once it's in, then you receive potentially, say, a conditional offer. Then you can decide if you want to take it on or move forward with it. But get it in, because you'd rather have it in than miss out.
Totally.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amanda.
Well, do you encourage a range of artists? Of course, yes, a range of artists, a range of different practitioners to apply. That's what we're looking for. Vive la différence, right, Scott? So we want as many people in the room with different ideas as possible. I think that would be great. And you've got a master's and you're keen to expand your practice, so you're sort of perfect, obviously. Hannah, I remember Hannah. Do I remember you, Hannah? Okay, way back in 2001, or maybe not. Maybe my practice has been mural, no public art experience. Can you give an idea of opportunities in the industry? Planners? Well, as I just said, there are, we have in MAP we have a number of. We subscribe to a number of platforms that advertise the tenders for public art across the country and internationally, and the lion's share of them are for public art murals, in the regions, in the cities, and so on. So there's definitely lots of opportunities in the industry for painters, and that's actually something we're trying to look at a bit more closely now. In fact, because what I've shown you is, probably sculptors who transform into public art, and so the answer is yes. We'd be delighted to open up opportunities and to discuss that critically, but just critically the space of public art mural.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Hannah. We've actually had another question that's popped in on the chat from Daniel. Interesting question. He's asking, one, is the grad cert encouraging interdisciplinary connections with other fields, say like the arts faculty?
Yeah, look, I think, this is the thing. I talk about public art as a hybrid practice. I think it's very particular to, the context in which we're existing. But as I mentioned before, we've been in big artist-led projects with writers, thinkers, Indigenous leaders, scientists, and so on. And it's very exciting, and the outcomes are very, very interesting. So yes, we are encouraging interdisciplinarity because this is an interdisciplinary course. So I think for you, Daniel, what you'll need to do is just supply us with evidence of a kind of practice, because sure, the art history and theory unit will give you, some, strong context of the field of public art practice in all its different modes. But the studio and the communications, or you probably need the communications and technology unit, and at its kind of sort of most basic level, unless you have other skills. But you'll need to show us some sort of visual proficiency, I think. Yeah.
Beautiful. And a really great question too, because what underpins a lot of the research and study that goes on in the Faculty of Art Design and Architecture is at an interdisciplinary nature. I can never get that out properly, sorry. But Yeah, it's great.
Well, I think the disciplines of art, architecture, and design are clearly linked through studio methodology, and they are completely aligned. But they're quite different as well. You know, I think architecture and design are kind of often, you know, they solve problems in the world in quite an applied way. Fine art's probably more aligned to sort of philosophy and ideas, I think, than design and architecture, sort of speaking more broadly. I think the beauty of public art is it really is a way for those fields to operate together. And that's where we see its with great potential, actually. You know, I think it's where it sort of resides in a silo, you know, it's probably, well, it's a, you know, contentious thing to say, but we think it has a very specific, you know, and exciting future. Daniel's answered another question. Who is the audience for the art? Like which public? Well, that is a big question. What is the public? Who is the public? What is the public now, Daniel? You know, what's the digital public, the public sphere that Habermas talked about? You know, and the unit really looks at stuff like that, really, not just the history and theory of public art, but connections between space, place, and society, more broadly, the history of spectacle culture from the exposition. I wrote this in the theme park and event cities, for example, and the notion of other public cultures, like Indigenous public culture. What does that look like? And the virtual culture of the digital age. So there is actually such a proliferation of publics. So, you know, I mean, that operates, it operates largely in Australia. You know, we have a number of projects in Melbourne and Sydney, but we've done projects in Perth, we've done projects in Brisbane, so it's Australia-wide, and we have projects overseas. So your audience is where you're located, isn't it? So, that's a kind of, it's a webinar, Daniel. You've asked a question that could go on for a long time, and that's why we're running the course. I hope that answers it.
Thank you so much. I might also just quickly ask you while we're here with, and we sort of touched on it a bit earlier on before, but with the extra requirements, so the statement of intent, 300 to 500 words, what are you kind of looking for in that from the applicants?
Oh, I mean, I think you talk about why you'd be interested in doing a course like this, what previous experience you've had, some idea of what you think public art is, you know, maybe examples of public art that you've experienced and what you thought of them. It can be, you can say bad things and good things. It can be critical. Why you want to do it at Monash? You know, is there anything particular about the culture at Monash that you think sounds interesting for you? You know, I think we're really brilliantly placed to deliver this, and we've been building up a kind of critical mass of practitioners, you know, in this space for a long time. So it just makes sense for us to do it.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Callum, I was going to ask you to, you've asked them as part of the extra requirements to put in a compilation of evidence of work. What are you looking for there? And what if you're not necessarily an artist, but aligned in the industry? So what kind of pieces of work would you like to see there?
Look, you know, I mean, even conceptually, if you could write, you know, if you didn't have any images, let's say with Daniel from Arts, if you didn't have any images of what, or any visual imagery at all, you could write a paragraph of an idea for public artwork, and that could be a work, you know. I mean, brilliant. Because, you know, we would look at the ideation, and because the course is teaching you how to bring your ideas into the world. So, but ideally, we're expecting most people to be from creative practice, visual culture in some way. So when I say examples of creative work, you know, it could be anything. It could be models, it could be drawings, it could be paintings, it could be small sculptures, it could be evidence of public art you've done. I noticed there's some people on there. I think James Moller was on there. He's done some terrific work in the community already. So, you know, it's a no-brainer what he would submit. So if you've done any public art, yes, submit that. If you work collaboratively, in this kind of field, as a designer or as an architect or a landscape architect, submit some of that work that you've been a part of. Often those people might be working in large firms, and the authorship is shared between everyone on the project. Just show me the projects you worked on. Show us what your capacity is too technically. I mean, for us to get a measure on what type of communications and technology unit we need to run, we will need to know what the proficiency is in that space. So that would be very helpful as well.
Brilliant, thank you. We've also got another question that's come in from Amanda, which is around the closing date. So there are limited places in the course. So we're suggesting to try and aim to get the application in by mid-November. And then there's quite a quick turnaround there. So application closing date for semester 2, so semester 2 next year. If you want to start in February, March next year, aim to get your application in mid-November. If you're looking to apply to start in July 2021, then your application would need to be in by, I think it's the 31st of May.
Yeah. And it's just to say that, maybe some of you have some questions about, good answer, Scott, about COVID and the effect it will have on the delivery of a course like this. We're imagining that we're encouraging students to be on campus because everything we've heard, and the university is trying to get everyone up and running as much as possible by first semester next year. But we imagine that it will be a sort of blended learning space. So there'll be some delivery, in face-to-face, and there'll be some delivery online as well. I mean, there's no problems with delivering this course online. Every part of it, we have platforms that can, we can reproduce, the physical in many ways, and we think we can deliver it really well. And we have already sort of delivered so many of our courses very successfully. And in fact, we're an expert in delivering kind of studio units online now. So that would be kind of exciting to trial a new, it'd be good to see you all, but exciting to trial a new context.
Absolutely. I've just popped the link in there again to the actual course page for the Grad Cert in Public Art. So you can all definitely have a look at that. I know we've only got a few more minutes, five or so minutes left. So please, if you've got any questions for Callum about the course or about the projects, definitely send them in.
Might be good to talk about, it mentions the fees and fee assistance for anyone who's has that as a question. But Scott, maybe you could help for just tell them about fee help.
Absolutely. So the graduate certificate, like all postgraduate programs, is a full fee program. With this though, as it's Australian citizens who are applying for it are eligible for, as an Australian citizen, you're eligible for fee help, which is basically means that it defers it to the tax system, and then you just pay it off once you earn over X amount of dollars per annum. So at least that takes care of that. Yeah. And the best thing with the fee help for the postgrad level is it doesn't attract an interest rate. It's just indexed at the CPI. So that actually it can be quite a relief for you if people are thinking or worrying about the fees. That information is all on the website. It does get a bit like, as most university websites, they can be quite large. But basically, in a nutshell, if you're an Australian citizen, then you're eligible for the fee help to defer your fee for that price. Classes start late February, early March next year. And as Callum was mentioning, the university is moving forward with the plan that we will be on campus. We do align to what government regulations are, but potentially we will be on campus, and there may be some aspects blended learning, so online. We've got another question from Daniel. How many hours are you expecting people to study? So on campus, the class lectures, and then how much are you expecting to do home with research, reading, that sort of thing, work on assignment?
I think it's contact time is 8 hours. But Erin might correct me there. Contact time 8 hours, always at 10. And I think homework or after hours would be
It's usually about double that.
about double that. So, you know, we would expect sort of 20 hours a week. But of course, you know, as ever with these things, you know, it could
Peaks and
go
troughs depending on what
peaks
the
and troughs,
project
depending
are.
on what you're doing and how much time you're wanting to invest in it.
Yeah. And the rationale behind the amount of work they ask you to do at home is so that you to aim to achieve a credit to distinction average. So that's
Yep.
the rationale behind it. Another question has come in. Government changes to university fees affect the cost of the course.
Well, it already has actually. I mean, we have sort of, we have set the fee at a kind of reduced rate in the beginning, given, you know, we understood the context. So, Scott, you can answer that one.
Yeah, that fee has pretty much not changed, which is really good. So my understanding from the upper level execs in the faculty is that they were conscious of what was happening in that realm of art, design and architecture, and the community and what's been happening this year. So they were really trying hard to make sure that there wasn't fee increases or any substantial fee increases as we moved into 2021. Which is kind of nice to hear that Monash was like thinking that way. So partly Callum too. So thank you, Callum, being one of the senior execs at the faculty. Thank you very much, Anonymous. So I guess if there's any last questions, because I'm really conscious of the fact that everyone's taken time out to be with this. So thank you very much.
Yeah. So thank you so much. We're so excited to get so many people wanting to attend tonight, and you know, that's really encouraging for us. And, you know, this is something we've wanted to do for a long time. And so we're all very pumped to try and...
there is, if may I interrupt you?
Yes.
Daniel has come through and asked, do I need to take time off work? Do you know roughly what the class schedule or timetabling might?
No, we haven't set the schedule yet because we were waiting to see on enrollment. So, I mean, that would be another thing to consider. You know, I mean, after, you know, there's potential we could just sort of do after our studios, but, you know, we'll just have to assess it, really. Look, I think if you're going to take on something like this, you know, you'll have to manage your work commitments. There's no question, everyone does. But, you know, just wait and see, really, where it falls. So, you know, happy to answer that a bit later, and we'll be conscious of trying to fit, you know, adapt to everyone's needs.
And if you just happen to mention the list of artists that Callum mentioned that potentially you'll connect with next year, I think your employer will be fine for you to make the balance. There is a question, not a question, but a statement from Well to say thank you very much, Callum, for the evening. So thank you. Thank you, Well.
So thank you for turning up, and hopefully we'll get to see you next year.
Absolutely. We're really looking forward to being back on campus and seeing everyone next year.
Yeah, the map office is sitting up there fallow. No one's been in there for months. It's a bit sad, but anyway, looking forward to getting on them. Maybe next week, everyone. Maybe next week.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. All for Dan Andrews. I think he's done an amazing job, but I'd love to get back to the studio. I'd love to get into the office.
I see. Well, I think that might be it if there's no more questions. Thank you all very much for joining us. As I mentioned, I've popped a link in there to have a look at the information on the course, and it also has the entry requirements, what you need to do, and also the link to apply. We're definitely suggesting, because there are limited numbers in this particular course, and it's quite bespoke, so you are working directly one-on-one with Callum through this, which is amazing to be able to do. We would encourage you to try and get your applications in by mid-November, and then you'll be able to get some notification in the following weeks after that. So you'll receive some emails tomorrow from Monash University. Again, that'll follow-up emails that'll just have information and the links again to the course. And also, if you've got any questions, please contact us via the information in the emails. Thank you. If there's any other questions, let us know. Otherwise, enjoy your evening. Thank you so much. Tell your friends, share the information. And if you've got any more questions, please email us and we'll be more than happy to answer. Callum, for you?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I'm looking forward to you all enrolling and we'll get up there and get started next year. So thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Enjoy your evening. Bye.